Hey everyone, so here's kind of an engagement lecture for you guys. Sorry I've been slacking on these. Kind of want to talk to you today about being explicit with your SQL joins. I've seen on some of the assignments that some people kind of fall into the habit of only using the word join, which I know is included in the lecture notes and the PowerPoints, and that's something that is kind of an old way of writing SQL and not really what we should be doing now. It works. So, you look at it and you see like you write join without doing inner join, left join, right join. It still runs, but we're not being explicit with it. And then for people that are following, and you should always be thinking about when your people are following along behind you in your code, because we're not the ones that are going to maintain stuff forever. So we need to think about that. So being explicit can save you from some serious data integrity issues, debugging nightmares, and just confusion with your team, especially if you're working in a team over something like cloud-based or something like that. So when you write just a simple join, which you've probably seen in your reading, just the word join instead of left join, right join, inner join, it defaults to inner join, which means only records that match in both tables will be returned when it matches on the key. But if you want to include all the records from one table, for like a left join, and then your result set will silently drop your unmatched record. So it's going to look fine, everything's going to look fine, but then the reality is you've lost some records you may be wanting to have in there. So that can completely change your metrics, whether it's patient count drops, revenue total shrinks, student roster looks incomplete, and you have no way of knowing. Like if we had a student roster on inner join and we're looking on your assignments or something, and one of you didn't have it, didn't do your assignment, and we're joining on your student ID for your assignments and then your student record, it would show the class list being smaller than what it is, or I just want to show that you didn't do your assignment or that you did do your assignment or something like that. So it's important to do something like that, because default behavior isn't always obvious. When you're explicit with it, it's about readability as well. In my daily life with all my coding, I spend a lot of time, you might call it OCD, making sure my code is readable and presentable, and that it's important for me to be able to read it easily so I get in my habits, but also it's important that anybody who follows behind me is also able to read it properly. There's nothing more frustrating than looking at a couple hundred lines of code and it's just the formatting's wrong, or they use just an outdated way of coding, like only using join instead of left join, right join, inner join. And it can just make things more complicated and harder to deal with. Or even you in the future, like the way you're coding today is not going to be the way you're coding a year from now. It's going to change. You're going to evolve. You're going to get better. And you're going to look at your old stuff, which I do constantly. And they're like, man, what was I doing? So just be good about using inner join, left join, right join instead of just the word join. It's not wrong, but it's not right. If that makes sense. And then it instantly communicates intent. If we're all coding with the same standards and doing things the same way, then it really builds trust in our shared code and how we're all working together. If we're using something big like Databricks or some other cloud-based things, or we're all working on queries together, it makes it easier if we're all working on the same page with the same kind of current way to do it. And then defining the joins shows that we can trust in what we're getting out of it, and then it's not going to be left behind or be weird or just leave any worry about it, because trust is a big thing in data and analytics. When the queries break and the data just looks off, with you have your explicit joins, you can really, it makes it easier to troubleshoot. If you know there's something that's supposed to be in there and you have done left joins and they're not in there, then you can kind of troubleshoot that a little bit. By defining each of your clearly, you can kind of pinpoint performance issues like unnecessary cross joins or mismatched cardinalities before they affect anything production you're doing. And then database optimizers, which are a thing, especially in more enterprise level stuff. It's easier to plan the queries and deal with the queries if it's explicit, instead of having the non-explicit ones that just causes confusion and it's harder for everything. So kind of best practices, always specify your join types. Some of you are really good about that. Some of you are kind of just missing it and only using join, which again, it's not wrong, but just for better coding habits, make sure you're doing that way. So be intentional, not accidental with your joins. So be purposeful with it. Um, SQL does not care how big your queries are. You can use extra white space. You can use the extra characters. It's not like some. So be explicit with it and use the powers there. Use your aliases meaningfully to clarify your relationships. An alias like A, B, 1, 2, those are worthless. Worthless aliases. They work, but when you're trying to code later, or if I'm looking at your code later, especially if you're writing hundreds of lines, um, your aliases should be meaningful and not just the letter A. I have no idea what A is. I have no idea if you're using a temp view or a CTE named A, what it means. Be meaningful with it. It doesn't have to be a big, drawn out thing, but just a word that says student for something instead of S. That goes a long way to now I know that you're kind of what we're supposed to be working with. Comments of your friends. If you're doing some complex joins, use your comments. It's a big deal. There's no reason to not use comments. Again, not only for yourself when you're looking back at something you're doing, but also think about the people that will be working on your stuff after you move on, and being able to do it. You would like them to be able to build off your work and continue to use the things you did and not have to reinvent the wheel every time because your coding was bad. And then just validate. Yeah, just make sure you always go back, go through, make sure your joins are the right joins, make sure that your keys are joining on the right data types. You don't want to have integers joining on strings. You can just cause, even if your IDE can work with it and figure it out, it just slows things down. So just watch that and be explicit with your stuff. And it really helps document your thought process. And then it's just a good habit to get in. The stuff we're doing now is pretty simple. If you're in an advanced data analytics course or something like that where you're writing hundreds of lines of code, your life will be a nightmare if you just use things like join, inner join, right join, left join. They're your friends. Any questions or anything like that, please reach out anytime. I know access is kind of goofy. If you have questions about more enterprise level stuff or anything like that, also just reach out. And thanks.